Welcome back. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. As the listener knows, I have a lot of interest in what's happening in the public policy front, and I've recently got eye of the fact of an organization out there called the Niskanen Center, which is out of the Washington, D.C. area. Jerry Taylor, the president of that group, is joining us today. He is also a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, and delighted to have him on the program. Welcome, Jerry. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Kevin?
Good. Kind of give us the elevator speech, if you will, about the center.
Well, I'm out of the Libertarian community, and a lot of Libertarians have spent a great deal of time trying to change the political terrain and improve the number of people who believe in limited government and autonomy and civil liberties and peace. And that's a wonderful thing, and I'm all in favor of trying to wage and win the war of ideas outside of Washington. But the reality is that public policy has changed in Washington, and the political terrain isn't what we want it to be. It's what it is. So the Niskanen Center was set up to advance libertarian ideas in Washington, with Washington insiders being our audience. And our objective is to get as much done as we can legislatively and through the regulatory process as possible, given the political situation as it exists. So, for instance, if you talk to a lot of libertarians, you talk about monetary policy, oftentimes you'll hear them say, well, we need to abolish the Federal Reserve, we need to have a gold standard, competitive currencies, things like that. You know, put aside the merits of the idea, the reality is we're not going to abolish the Fed tomorrow. So what can we do to improve monetary policy in the near term, given the political circumstances that we face? Well, unfortunately, a lot of libertarians haven't spent a great deal of time thinking those matters through, and libertarians have not invested a lot in trying to work within the political terrain that we have in front of us, and that's what the Niskanen Center is trying to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of equate it to a lot of libertarians, in my opinion, are almost like armchair quarterbacks, as if they have as much power as a football fan in changing the way the direction our country goes. You know, and a lot of it comes back to Ludwig von Mises, who I'm a huge fan of, says there is no third way. We either have complete liberty or we have totalitarianism. It's a question of how much totalitarianism will you tolerate. You know, and the reality is that we're never going to have complete freedom, particularly in a country like the United States. We're going to have a mixed economy. But whatever we can do to have that mix gravitating towards liberty, I think the better.
No, I agree with you. In fact, I mean, it's a wonderful thing that libertarians have a lot of packages to sell whole loaves of bread, but they can't always get the whole loaf politically. Maybe they can only get half the loaf, maybe a quarter of a loaf, maybe only 3 slices. But if libertarians continue to insist that it's all or nothing, with no compromises or no concessions either side in the course of moving our policy agenda, libertarians will continue to get out of Washington what they've gotten over the last 40 years: nothing. Libertarian public policy changes are extremely few and far between. And where we've seen positive things, say drug decriminalization and things like that, they haven't really been driven by libertarians. They've been driven by liberals or other political parties and interest groups. So I think it's time for libertarians to get into the game and to accomplish as much as we can given the political circumstances. That sometimes means compromise. It sometimes means making concessions. But if you can improve public policy, then I think that's a job well done, and that's what we're going to try to do.
So how would you say you're different from Cato?
Well, Cato is involved in changing minds and waging and winning the war of ideas. And as I say, that's important. I'd like to see more libertarians in America and make my job of changing public policy easier. But Cato doesn't, nor not only Cato, but very few libertarian organizations spend much energy in trying to talk to legislators, come up with compromises and agreements that can move politically. And figure out a way to actually change legislation and rack up some wins in the here and the now. That's not a fault of the Cato Institute. Heck, I worked there for 20-odd years. I have very good friends over there, and I have a lot of supporters from the Cato Institute. But it's a different job. What we need in the libertarian movement is for somebody to try to roll up their sleeves and actually execute public policy change in a positive direction. And that means putting aside what I'd like the political world to look like and dealing with it as it is. A good example of that is climate change regulation. If you talk to a libertarian, they generally tell you there shouldn't be any climate change regulation. This should all be done through property rights and torts or something like that. there's a very good intellectual argument for that proposition. But if you're on a TV show and you're asked, what do you do about climate change regulation? And the first thing you say as libertarian is, well, we need to privatize the air sheds and then allow people to sue one another for trespass and nuisance. Well, you might as well just say, check, please, and walk out the door. You're not going to get a political hearing for that. So the reality is we have command and control regulation at EPA right now. We have no strategy to roll it back. The only way we're going to get rid of that regulation is if we can provide a concession to the Democrats to encourage them to pick something better. And so what we're pushing is a carbon tax in lieu of the existing regulatory structure. Give us a carbon tax, we'll make EPA go away on the regulatory front, in the course of which we'll also kill a lot of green energy subsidies and other interventions to try to rig energy markets, and just go ahead and use price signals and allow market actors to decide when, where, and how to reduce emissions as opposed to leaving it to regulators.
Right.
Now, it may not be a perfect solution from a libertarian perspective. I can come up with all kinds of more ideal solutions. But the reality is there is no ideal libertarian solution that's got a chance in heck of moving in Washington. This would at least move us in a positive direction. I think it's worth working for.
Yeah, it's like the language of anarcho-capitalism, and they wonder why it falls on deaf ears. It's like, that sounds great, but the language itself in a culture like ours that is kind of has this presumption now of proactive government, often to our own demise, it just doesn't make sense. For example, we need to abolish minimum wage because minimum wage, wages should be an exchange between an individual and a company they work with. What business does government have in that? Good luck with that. But something that might work instead is saying the federal government is going to get out of the minimum wage business entirely, but we're going to mandate the states to do it and let the states be that original melting pot that the founding fathers originally intended, and let them develop policies that work for their particular states, and maybe have enterprise zones in cities like Camden, New Jersey, or East St. Louis, Illinois, and Detroit, Michigan, to try to spark economic activity. But to say we're going to do nothing, good luck with that.
No, I agree with you. I think politics is the art of the possible, and one of the reasons that the libertarian community has such a poor record of policy change over the past 40 years is that libertarians are reluctant to engage in the art of the possible because it requires compromises and concessions, and making sausage is a dirty and disreputable business in the eyes of a lot of people, not unfairly so. And so libertarians, I think, have done a wonderful job arguing their case to the public, and I think it's a compelling case. But the reality is the number of people who would raise their hand to say, yes, we should abolish all minimum wage laws is vanishingly small. And so you can either be utterly irrelevant to the policy debate and continue to complain when public policy moves against you, or you can accept the political train as a given and try to do the best you can given circumstances. Maybe we can't eliminate the minimum wage, but maybe we can reduce the damage done by the minimum wage by various other practices. And that's what we're trying to do, is find places where we can improve public policy and bring it in a more libertarian, market-oriented direction and get the most we can given the cards that we're dealt.
Sir Taylor, I appreciate it very much. Before we wrap it up, give us that website, the best website for people to learn more about the center.
Well, you can go ahead and find us at niskanencenter.org. We're pretty easy to find.
Yep, that's Niskanen, Niskanen Center.org. You'll also find a link for it over at priceofbusiness.com. And, Jerry, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kevin.
I appreciate it. We'll get you back on in the future. I'd like to hear how you're progressing. It's a brand new organization. Just started the latter part of last year. Is that correct, Terry?
Yes, we just we launched. We started last year. We launched policy operations in January, so we're new, but we're already starting to make some hay. And look forward to be back on your show to talk about what we're doing.
Awesome. All right, when we come back tomorrow, we're going to have much more for you. I do want to remind you, though, the show continues 24/7 at priceofbusiness.com, and the best content from this show, including this interview, will be found over there at the national news website, usdailyreview.com. While there, like it on Facebook, follow it on Twitter.